Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to this episode. Today we're talking with Abraham. He is the founder of Think Differently, and today we're going to talk about the transformation model for the future of work. But before we get into the content, Abraham, tell us a little bit about yourself and Think Differently.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you. This is awesome to join you and your community. Hopefully, we could get some people to think differently.
Yeah,
All right, so let me tell you a little bit about the company. Our mission statement and our purpose is in the name, and we want to keep it very simple. So our goal is to help companies and people think differently about the situations that they find themselves in. And we specialize in change management and performance coaching. So performance, think like behavior modification, elite mindset type stuff, all in the organization. And we've been doing this for a while. And our goal really is when someone comes to us, we help them see the situation, but then we'll use interdisciplinary thinking to get them to see the possibilities of what they could do. Because normally you'll see that someone tries to solve a problem using the same old ways, and then they're like, how come I can't get through it, right?
yep,
So that's really a very brief kind of synopsis of Think Differently and who we are.
that's awesome. That's awesome, and
Yeah.
I agree with you. That's part of what we try to deliver with ChangeNerd. You're absolutely right. When you think about change and even just performing differently, you have to think differently. Like that's where it all starts. So your transformation model. You mentioned that it's specifically for the future of work. What's your perspective on the future of work?
Well, right. I think it's a term that right now it's just being thrown around like a phrase, right? And it's a hot topic, so everybody's trying to get up on there. But really, the future of work is right now. And
Mhm.
here's what I mean. If you're not working on your skills or if you're not working on your business, you're by the minute being outdated and things are moving so quick.
Yep.
And what we get asked to do oftentimes is specific to helping individuals upskill or reskill or really change their mindset about what they need to do to get themselves ready for the things that are happening.
Mhm.
And what I'm seeing is that organizations are calling the future of work really change projects or transformational projects. They're redesigning. They're bringing in like RPA, or they'll bring in AI to do some analytics and help them make decisions about consumer insight. But then that now gives time to people who were doing the work. Um, it frees them up from some of the stuff they had to do, which
Yeah.
means oftentimes human behavior is just if you get some free time you're going to fill it in with garbage or what I call mind junk food. You just fill it in with just things that are unnecessary. And
Yeah.
so companies are afraid that if they give people time back, they're just going to get busy with work doing something else that's not really proactive.
Yeah.
And so for us, the future of work is really how do we get people right now to think differently about the things they have to set themselves up for success. And as it relates to self development, growth, skills, and things like that. And so that's how we're looking at it. And then that's how we use the transformation model in there.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So explain to us, explain the transformation model.
Yep. Okay. Well, first, I'd like to start with there's a difference between change and transformation. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And oftentimes, when a client calls and they'll say, "Hey, I want to run this transformational initiative, digital transformation," when it comes down to it, it's really just a change project because they just want people to use a new system and that's it. That's not transformation. That's just change,
Hmm.
right? And so when we look at change, it's simply the difference between A and B. So what I like to say as simple as this: right now I'm sitting down, but if I stand up, I've changed. It doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't make me more sophisticated. It's just difference. And it also has a stop time frame. It means that once you're there, you're done and you don't need to do anything different. With transformation, what we like to define it as is just this evolving process that once you get to a milestone, there's a very important philosophical question, which is now what? So you get to that desired state, but then you think, okay, we're here. Now what? What do we do with what we have? And then you then pivot. And so you're now continuously evolving. And so in essence, the transformation model in the book, the way we have it looks complicated, but it's really condensed down to 5 simple questions that we just use throughout the process.
I love
And
that.
those questions begin to formulate change strategies or communication plans, learning plans, things like that. And so it's it's based on interdisciplinary thinking. And so everything out there has already been talked about, created in some way, some form. This
Yeah.
is now leveraging different mindsets to help people get to where they want to go. And then ask that question, now what, right? We're here. Now what? What do we do?
I love that. I love that. I've worked with different organizations and work with them to kind of co-create a change management model. And whether
Yeah.
it was 3 phases or 4 phases, the most proven method has been just using simple questions. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right, to get people to think about now what, like, how do you proceed forward. So um, can you walk us through your questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. When we look at the model, it starts with what, right? So when we get a client, the initial question is, what do you want to work on, or why are we being in, or what are we being engaged for? That's a very simple one. They'll often say something like, okay, well, I want to transform the way my team communicates, so I want to do a team building activity. And then for me, the more important question is why, and I'll start using some 5 whys in there because they'll come with a presenting symptom, but that's only a symptom of a much larger issue. And so in that example, somebody will say team building, and that's a real example. So the client said, I want team building, and then I started asking why. Why is it that team building is important for you?
Mhm.
And then they said, well, I find that people are not really communicating with each other. So I think actually it's communication that we need. And I was like, really? Okay, well, tell me a little bit more about why that is. And so we started digging deeper and deeper. And then at the end, just to make the story shorter, it turns out that she was tired of meetings that she had to have with the team, and it was all around roles and responsibilities. So
Yep.
she had all these extra steps that were causing her to be frustrated by the lack of clarity. And
Yep.
so what went from team building, communication, it came down to role clarity. And so at first she was asking for like MBTI and Strength Finder. I was like, you don't need all that, right?
Yeah.
So once we came down to the why, it was like, I'm just tired of doing all this paperwork and all these meetings. Help me with that.
Yeah.
And it was role clarity. And so it became much simpler. All right. So when we look at the steps is what do you want? Why do you want it? And then I incorporate something called the 6 pack. The 6 pack comes from aviation. And so pilots have a dashboard. And on this dashboard, there's tons of information that they get. But there's only really 6 key instruments that help keep that thing up in the air. And it
Yep.
helps your orientation and if you're going too fast, like all that, right? And so only 6 key instruments. And so I translate that into organizations or personal goals. And I tell people, look, let's look at how do we know you're making progress and how will we know you got to what you wanted to do? And then we then put simple metrics like in a 6 box, or oftentimes I just tell them, I know I'm saying 6, but I think we could do 3. And so
Yeah.
I get them from really, because everyone wants to overcomplicate things. They want to measure for everything, right? So
Yeah.
we go from the 6 pack, and then it goes into uh, blockers and barriers. And well, actually, step back, it goes into length of time. When we look at length of time, oftentimes people say, or clients will tell us, we want this yesterday. And so we'll say, okay, you should have called us 2 years ago to help you get to where you are right now. And length of time, I use that as an indicator to say, to help you think of how aggressive you need to be with the things you need to do. And if you have, let's say, 6 months, now you know, okay, in these 6 months, we got to get these things done and in this format. But I also use it as a flag indicator, meaning if people give me way too much of a runway, that's usually a sign that they won't prioritize the work that needs to be done. And if it's too short, then I'm like, all right, well, are you willing to do all these other things required to get it done? And then again, you get a priority. They'll say, I don't think so, or yeah, absolutely. And then that gives you immediate momentum.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we move over to the barriers and blockers. So barriers and blockers, there's 4 things in projects and just in goals that always get in the way: people, process, policy, technology. Those four things always, always, always get in the way.
Yep.
And of those four, there's two that you can count on and you can use it as a prediction. So people and process. And think of, last project you worked on.
Yeah.
What are the top two things that get in the way? People or process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the other ones are policy and technology. And so once you look at that, you can anticipate, okay, I know that certain key people will get in the way or certain processes will slow us down. The next step is now your support system.
Yep.
So support system is really about creating either micro habits or behavior modification to sustain the change. What I find is change is easy. The hard part is sustaining it. And oftentimes where a client will say, okay, I'm going to do this, I could do it, but they don't have the reinforcers or the support system they need to keep that going. And so it could be as simple like a physical environment, the way the setup is designed.
Yep.
It could be mental, it could be emotional, or it could be as far as like people getting you to do something, right? And so if you have that support system, if you're thinking about a personal goal, a people support system could be, who do you surround yourself with, and do they help you ask the right questions to get to that next part of your process, or do they put you down? Do they say, that's stupid, why would you do that, that's dumb, nobody's going to care, right? Like then your support system is like, yeah, you're probably right, why would I do that? And then you revert. And then the last one there is the now what. So you go through all those phases and then you get to, okay, I've got to where I wanted to be. Now what? Is this it? Like if I'm a company and I save $10 million, now what? What am I going to do with that savings? Am I
Mhm.
going to reinvest it? Am I going to do another restructure? What am I doing? And that's, I think, where change converts into a transformation, which goes, okay, so we've saved 10 million. Let's do X, Y, and Z to go to that next stage, right? And so, in a nutshell, that's the transformation model there as a set of questions.
Yeah, I love it because the nature of work is different now. It seems like everything is project oriented.
Yeah.
It's like everything is project oriented, and when you kind of pull back when you kind of pull back the surface a little bit, you're like, This is not really a project. This is almost like base business."
Yeah. Yeah.
But the organization itself is always trying. The stronger ambition is always to transform. So I really really like that model. So what are
Yeah.
some are there any case studies or examples that you can, more tactical examples that you can provide where you use this model with different organizations?
Yep. So a good one right now is we're looking at skill sets. So working with a place now, a couple of clients are doing the same thing. And so one of them is looking at current skill sets of people. But what I'm finding is we need to get to the people for them to do a personal gap analysis. So
Yeah.
that's how we're using the transformation model, right? So what happens is we'll work with an individual and say, okay, self-reflect of where are you right now? What do you think you're good at? Sometimes we'll use like a strength finder or some kind of skill assessment, and then it'll give them an indicator of the things that they naturally gravitate towards. And then we also look at where the organization wants to be as skill sets. And so to tangibly apply the model, we'll say, all right, so you want to know more about data storytelling as a skill.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So why is that important? Right. And then we start going through each part of the model. And then at the end, what happens is they'll have a solid plan of how to execute, how to use a six pack to make sure they're keeping track of their progress, and then have a support system to help them get that done. Right. And so all these pieces fold in there. Um, with with the skills of the future, it's interesting because all these people are spending time looking at very technical things like data science, AI, Power BI, Tableau. Not everyone needs those skills, and they're forgetting also about these other skills. Like uh, once you remove tactical things that people have to do and you put that on a robot or put that on some kind of machine learning or algorithm, you have to teach them about relationship skills, building relationships, right? And so with change management, as you know, stakeholder engagement, all those things are critical for success as you move forward. And so we use the transformation model essentially in the beginning with the clients to do that skills assessment of where they are right now. Then we use it to implement tactical things they could do as a result of that. And then we start measuring the progress across time. And so then we put the individuals in projects based on skill, not necessarily on their role or the title that they have. And so we've been seeing some pretty good traction with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. Abraham, thank you so much for your time today, giving us your insights on your transformation model for the future of work. Tell the audience, where can people find you?
Well, it, I think the best place I spend most of my time on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So you can find me there on LinkedIn. We'll also put our website up there so people can take a look. And then also what I want to throw out there is we'll give people a chapter one of the roundtable, which is what we use for the transformation model. So for your audience, we'll give people access to free chapter one so they can get a hold of what the transformation model is, how to use it, and some ideas with client work.
Mhm.
Um, that way they can get smart on it and start using it. And for me, really, I want them to learn it, but make it their own. And we're finding that after like 2 or 3 times that people use it, they start making their own iteration and they just become their own transformation expert in a way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, well, Abraham, thank you so much for your time, and just really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian.